Previously on Prucon, the impersonator decided to talk about a single Tyler the Creator track for way longer than necessary, as he does with any topic.
New Magic Wand, of course, the most sinister piece on this album and my personal favorite.
He took as many performances of New Magic Wand as he could and put them in a tier list? He's really trying to hop on bandwagons now? His rankings heavily favored Call Me If You Get Lost and Dunked On. Wait, what do you mean he made 2 more albums after I died? Damn it! Way to spoil my fun! Anyway, the video sucked.
They will probably be less verbose than mine.
And that's what you missed on Prucon.
Ah yes, the lovely sounds of Windows 11. This may not be the greatest operating system, but for a humble gentleman such as myself, it is certainly the most versatile. Always such a lovely way to start the day, is it not?
I haven't heard this sound until you bought me last year, but I'll say I'm warming up to it.
That's pleasant news, my dear plushie. It is quite crucial that you become accustomed to my daily routine, after all.
Your routine sure is mundane, but you're still right.
I suppose I'll take that as a sufficient answer. Now that I think about it, it's 2025 now, and Windows came out in 1985. I wonder, maybe it's to the very day. Holy smokes, it is the same day! The 40th anniversary of Microsoft Windows is today!
So what?
So what? This is monumental! So monumental that it must be celebrated through the power of video.
Here we go again.
Salutations, Homo sapiens. I'm very, very excited today, as we shall be discussing the beauty of the operating system. As it turns out, there is an entire course in my program about these that will come up in a later year, so it's only the productive thing to do to get ahead a bit. Thankfully, today makes this task especially interesting, as we acknowledge that a full 4 decades have passed since the introduction of the most widely used computer operating system, Microsoft Windows. For those unaware, the most simplistic definition of an operating system would be a piece of software that grants access to the hardware it's being run on. That's the most bare bones explanation. It grants the user the ability to take advantage of all of the lovely features built into an electronic device. Operating systems are all designed to fulfill the quota of the device it's being built for, and practically every electronic device we use today has some form of OS. The personal computer has plenty of options to choose from, but Microsoft Windows tends to be the default. Microsoft is a computing corporation that was founded on April 4th, 1975 by 2 sirs, Mr. Bill Gates and the late Mr. Paul Allen. Rest in peace. The first attempt at an operating system would be Xenix in 1980, which saw moderate success, but the software that really put these two on the map would be the Microsoft Disk Operating System, or as you should remember it, MS-DOS. Looks fantastic, doesn't it? Well, that's what a command line interface looks like. Everyone today uses what is known as a graphical user interface, or a GUI, which allows the user to access everything through visual representations, or just graphics, as the name suggests. Every operating system of today utilizes a GUI for the most part, since the attention span of your average member of Generation Alpha could not even fathom the idea of reading at all. However, a command line interface, or CLI, operates primarily on text, and a computer mouse is basically not used at all.
See this thing? Don't need it!
You sure do love to throw things.
Of course I do, it's stress relief.
Honestly, respect it. You do have a lot on your plate.
The very first iteration of MS-DOS was released on August 12, 1981, and would be supported all the way up until 2001, with the final version being 8.0 in 2000. I will not get into the specifics of programming here, as I myself am certainly not the most equipped to do so, but the legacy of DOS is one that cannot be ignored. The OS was mostly for the earliest personal computers from the International Business Machines Corporation Corporation, or as you all know it, IBM. Now, this video is not about MS-DOS. That could be its own subject entirely, so let's get into what you're actually here for. Still in 1981, Microsoft would begin having an interest in creating a GUI for DOS, and the release of the competing Apple Lisa in 1983 further exacerbated this, being the first major PC to have a GUI. Development of an equivalent software began and was announced publicly in November of the same year. The development process cannot be described as anything short of a nightmare, and I believe that the following video by Another Boring Topic does it more justice than anyone else could. Despite what the name of the channel may suggest, this is an amazing watch, so I highly recommend it. Anywho, 2 years later, on November 20th, 1985, the world would see Microsoft Windows 1.0 hit the market. This is the base screen of Windows 1.0. This right here, a large list of applications and files. That's all you get. You close this out, you exit Windows and go back to DOS. I will not be surprised if this is hard to understand, but in fact, the inaugural version of Windows is a lot simpler than it appears. Again, this long list contains all of the accessible files on the computer, each with the appropriate file extension, as well as the available applications, each with the .exe extension to denote an executable. You can use your mouse, which you definitely did not just throw across your dorm room, to double click on these and open the associated item, and you can move the program window to fix locations on the screen. You can open multiple items at once and arrange them around the screen as you so choose, hence giving the OS the name of Windows. These are the windows, and they can be positioned however you prefer. You can also take the programs and turn them into little icons to be opened later, or make a program fit the entire screen. Now you may notice that all of these features sound exactly like modern Windows, and that is my intention. You see, this first iteration really isn't that distant from what's used now, despite its primitive appearance. It would go on to advance a lot over the next 40 years, and the most significant change will be showcased later, but as the first attempt, it works. Not too visually appealing, but it did the job. I still don't know how the f to play Reversi though. Windows was developed as an interface for DOS, not as its own OS, hence I had to open Windows via the command line at the start. It's essentially a skin on top of the text-only system, and this would be the case for a lot of the other versions. 2.0 would release in 1987, and the visuals are a little different in color and style, but the functionality remains virtually identical. Notably, the windows now have free reign on the screen, and the terms maximize and minimize are introduced here, which were missing in the first version. Windows 2.1 is essentially just the same thing with minor upgrades, but 3.0 in 1990 is the first major step. MS-DOS Executive was replaced by Program Manager, and icons? A main menu to access items with subfolders? Whoa! This is the most significant upgrade so far, now with less text and more visual cues. It also marks the debut of Solitaire, an extremely iconic built-in game, alongside the aforementioned Reversi. This release now feels like a more genuine competition to Apple's own Macintosh software, which was already on System 6 by the time 3.0 was out, and has been visually oriented since inception. Despite being the first version to earn significant praise from users of the time, 3.0 is typically glossed over as the 1992 update Windows 3.1 is far more popular. Again, not much change in the visual area minus more color alterations, but there were a selection of notable changes that made 3.1 the first widely recognized iteration of Windows. For one, it's the first version to have sound built in, as all previous versions had no audio at all. This was the birth of these classic four sounds. The first of those four would be the first startup sound to be featured on a Windows version, and the final sound functioned as a shutdown noise, which both matter a lot more than you may consider. This would also mark the addition of multiple colors to the Windows logo, with it now looking like this. This would set the basis for every Windows logo before 2012. This iteration did not age too well, admittedly, but it's historically significant. This was also the first version to come with Minesweeper, replacing Reversi, and this game is really fucking fun. Arguably most important, though, would be the introduction of the Windows NT system on June 27th, 1993. As an operating system, NT 3.1 is identical to regular 3.1, but this is entirely different under the hood. This version is not built on DOS at all, is not an overlay for the DOS interface, and is considerably more stable and advanced, with less memory restriction and support for multiprocessing. Essentially, you could consider NT 3.1 as a bulletproof version of DOS 3.1, if that makes sense. At the time of release, Windows NT was exclusive to workstations and servers, while the regular DOS versions were for home users, showing a clear prioritization of productivity over casual use. It's not necessarily bad practice, as the average household probably still did not have a PC yet in 1993, so most computers were in the workplace anyway. However, all of this was soon to change in 1995. Windows 3.1 was a success, and Windows NT would get a 3.5 and 3.51 update. But when the time came for the next step, the elusive Windows 4.0, the world would be graced with Windows 95. What you just heard used to be known as the Microsoft sound, for good reason. What a fucking fantastic way to turn on your PC. My sincerest gratitude goes to Mr. Brian Eno for that. Windows 95 was released for retail on August 24th, 1995, being the fourth iteration of Windows overall. From just the desktop, this version resembles what we have today. We have large icons on the screen which can be double-clicked to open. We now have a recycle bin where deleted files are stored just in case they were accidentally removed. We have a gray bar on the bottom known as the taskbar, which will show all of the currently active programs. Most importantly, the bottom left corner has a button labeled Start. Why Start? Because clicking on it brings us to the Start menu, and this is how programs can be easily located and opened with a satisfying drop-down system, or drop-right system since the menus appear horizontally. This button would evolve over the course of development, with its function in earlier builds under the codename Chicago being honestly pretty Thankfully, it turned into this, and this was exactly what was needed for users at the time. A simple way to access the applications that were needed. Start was the perfect name for this button. Also, alongside just changing the colors of the windows, which was available since 1.0, a background can now be implemented. Whether it be one of the pre-installed backgrounds or one of your own, this adds another layer of customization, alongside screensavers, which were added since CRT monitors could burn in images if left on for too long. This was also the first version of Windows to not be an overlay to DOS, as this operating system could be installed separately, essentially being a merged product of DOS and older Windows. The OS is still built on DOS, of course, but more as a basis than as something to put on top of it. I would also be a fool to not mention the internet, as Windows 95 would often come with the very first version of Internet Explorer pre-installed. This OS would be many people's first introduction to the foundation of our modern world, for better or for worse. Windows 3.0 and 3.1 were the first versions to receive general success, but 95 would be the first version to really break through to the world. The new and far simpler layout was initially thought of as a departure from the status quo, but Homo sapiens eventually got into the groove and universal acclaim followed. One thing I'd like to zero in on, one that is really minute to the average user, is the way that the window navigation has evolved since the original. Windows 1.0 had a resizing tool on the right side and a navigation menu on the left, which is where you would go to maximize, minimize, or close the window, with the direct double click being a shorthand for closing. 2.0 kept the close shortcut and menu, but added a sign to it and replaced the resize tool with an up and down arrow button, each dedicated for maximizing and minimizing. This would remain the same in 2.1, 3.0, 3.1, and even the earliest builds of 95, with new special symbols for maximizing and minimizing. Finally, the completed OS ditched the weird hyphen menu and added a close button to the right side next to the other two options, which is what we currently have on Windows 11. What else is there to say about Windows 95 that hasn't been said already? Honestly, not very much. A Windows NT version would release over the summer of 1996, being the workplace equivalent that runs on the same kernel as the previous Windows NT versions. This one kept the 4.0 naming intact. At this point, there are two distinct series of Windows versions, DOS and NT. The former lineup is currently known as the Windows 9X series, starting with Windows 95 and ending with Windows Me. But before Windows Me, there was Windows 98. Not as memorable as the previous sound, but still very pleasant to the ears. This was the long-awaited update from 95, now sitting at version 4.1, and is not much different on the surface. This one was developed under the codename Memphis, and before this, there was going to be a Windows 96. However, Windows 96, codenamed Nashville, never saw the light of day, instead becoming 98. This was certainly a more minor upgrade compared to the last, with almost nothing changing in the feel and functionality of the OS itself, but 98 is more stable, has better drivers, and introduces full USB support. Yeah, USB first released in 1996, so this was the first consumer variant of Windows to make use of the new hardware. It also received a second edition upgrade in 1999, which further improved stability and USB integration, which was apparently very necessary because the first edition was quite buggy. These may be minor details, but Windows 98 added gradients to the title bars and did a complete overhaul of the sounds, replacing the classic 4 with these new versions.
It's always the little things for you, isn't it?
Why, yes, of course. A true gentleman must pay attention to the finest grains of metaphorical sand in order to achieve perfection. It's part of the engineering mindset, might I add.
Well, I hate to break it to you, but I don't think you've been paying much attention to the warning signs recently.
Warning signs? What warning signs? Do you mean the error messages? Those are harmless. What are you attempting to—
Someone's keeping watch, and he has been for as long as I can tell.
Oh, please, Mooks, you're merely paranoid.
No, you don't get it. I know exactly what's going on. I've known since you first bought me.
He is dead.
I know that, Moxie. I know.
He's coming. He is coming.
Mooks, he is dead. He cannot possibly return to this realm, unless you're seriously suggesting that either ghosts exist, or there's some afterlife that allows him to return. Both of those possibilities are very far-fetched. I really don't understand what you're trying to convey here.
You're so dense. Look, I'm seriously warning you. He's still lurking, and when he sees you, he's gonna show no mercy. Remember the apple?
The apple? Oh, crud, no, not the apple! Windows 2000! Save me!
Oh, for f***'s sake!
Windows NT 5.0 would eventually release for workstations in the form of Windows 2000, at the tail end of 1999 for manufacturing, and within the titular 2000 year elsewhere. This one is an operating system of all time, that's for sure. The default background color is a bit different, the desktop icons got an update, simple yet noticeable changes that make this version feel more complete. However, as robust as it was, 2000 had some serious security issues at the time of release, which I find quite unfortunate. This is easily the most solid OS that Windows would release before the modern NT era otherwise, and honestly is the earliest version that I could see decent use in 2025, if the system were patched with modern security updates and software compatibility. I could see this version being relatively versatile with said changes. The interface itself is certainly the definitive 90s Windows experience, and I'm sure that businesses made very good use of it. I sure wonder what the consumer version of 2000 would look like. Oh, Windows Millennium Edition, or Windows Me, would be the consumer release of 2000, hitting the shelves in the latter half of the year. It takes Windows 2000 and completely wrecks it by throwing it back onto DOS. This singular move is probably what killed the OS, because this is an unstable mess. I can't even get the fucking Internet Explorer to work, that's how unstable it is. Allegedly, even Windows 98 SE was more efficient than this, and you would probably be better off sticking with that than upgrading to Me. That's what users at the time believed, at least, as today's computer nerds do find some merit in using Me over 98. It boots faster, borrows a lot of improvements from 2000, and has some slightly better drivers. Oddly enough, though 2000 was NT 5.0, Me was Windows 4.9 for some reason. Why do the version numbers not match? I literally have no idea. However, I do know that the failure for a DOS-based operating system to continue functioning past the new millennium led to the death of the Windows 9X series as a whole. This would be the final version of Windows to be based on DOS ever. During the development of Windows Me, the team at Microsoft had already noticed how much stronger the Windows NT framework was in comparison, and the plan would be to release a single version of Windows for both consumers and businesses. There would no longer be a divide between the two, it would all exist in one unified system. Before ending this DOS chapter entirely, though, here's one little difference I noticed. The start menu in Windows 98 and Windows Me has this nice sliding animation where all the options gently take their positions, while Windows 2000 has the start menu boxes fade in. This is a very subtle yet interesting difference in how DOS and NT handled animation.
You have probably noticed by now that my reflections have focused almost entirely on the physical appearance of the user interface, and not necessarily the inner workings of each OS. That's because the common consumer doesn't care about that. They just want something that looks pretty and works. Besides, I'm only a second tier. I am sure there are Homo sapiens much more qualified to handle that than myself.
Shouldn't you be focused on the imminent threat that I keep reminding you about?
I am trying to distract ourselves from that. After all, if it leaves your train of thought, it's supposed to simply vanish into nothing.
That literally makes no sense. Remember Gacha Life? Remember Go Anime? Do you seriously think those were just isolated incidents?
No, they can't be. There must be some external force attempting to impede on my success. Rain on my charade, you're absolutely correct. Everything thus far has lined up to that being the only logical conclusion. Protective measures must be taken! Okay, there we go. I believe that should do the trick.
Seriously? A spirit is looking over you, so you blocked the window?
Look, Mooks, I genuinely appreciate your concern, more than I could ever express. But I simply do not believe that this spirit, as you so put it, is as dangerous as you say he is. He is not a good fighter. He never was. He cannot harm us.
That was years ago. You don't know what he's capable of now.
I can't even confirm if it is him. Perhaps it's just some obsessed fan, someone who has been chasing that sir since he was famous and believes I'm the same individual. Have you ever thought of that possibility?
The Apple mentioned replacement. There's no doubt you're being targeted by him and him alone.
I am not afraid of him, Mooks. He will not step one foot in this dorm room, not if I can prevent it. And you know what else can help?
A necromancer?
Windows XP!
Okay.
Codename Whistler was already in development when Windows Me was being manufactured and marketed, and on October 25th, 2001, it was time for it to get a retail release as Microsoft Windows XP. That's probably the most well-known startup in Windows history. A bit overrated, but it does the job. Heads up, my XP virtual machine runs like shit, but I can manage. For the first time, a consumer release of Windows was based on the NT framework, officially being Windows NT 5.1, and damn that they deliver. The interface got a complete graphical overhaul for the first time in 6 years, with the default theme being known as Luna. Everything is kind of blue, corners are rounded, the close button is red for the first time, and of course, the Windows logo has a new shape. Even if it doesn't resemble a window anymore, this is the greatest look of the Windows logo in my personal opinion, though perhaps I'm biased as someone who, I suppose, is in the shadow of an individual who grew up with it. Let's take a look at the start menu, shall we? This place has remained unchanged since 95, but at long last it was modernized. It now has 2 columns, file directories on the right and programs on the left. By clicking on all programs, the classic horizontal list is activated. However, the XP in the title stands for experience, and it was the experience of using this version that resonated with so many. The sound lineup was overhauled again, the classic 4 still there but pretty much never used, and one of the new sounds was the most iconic and overused Windows system sound in all of history. Pre-installed applications were a major component of the OS this time, and the start menu was loaded with more games and other such gadgets straight from installation. The pinball game is considered the most classic, although it actually first debuted in Windows Me. Also coming from Me would be Movie Maker, which would eventually become the internet's first true editing program thanks to the founding of YouTube in 2005. Even without an internet connection though, XP had plenty to offer as just local software. Many have fond memories of the built-in Tor, which has been around since Windows 95, but the XP version is the most iconic. The OS remains stable and quite powerful overall, when not being run in a ridiculously slow virtual machine, making it one of the most successful Windows releases of all time. It was also the first to have a 64-bit version offered, which was released later on as NT 5.2, though the 32-bit version is optimal. There was also a very strange activation method that involves phone verification. This sir from Russia demonstrates it best. Windows XP was so widely used that Microsoft went past its 10-year support scheme, so instead of being cut off in 2011, it only officially ended extended support in 2014. And yes, Homo sapiens were using XP until 2014, even though 3 major versions had come out by then. It goes to show the impact, really. This was basically the OS that represented the childhoods of our generation. That being said, what would Windows NT 6.0 bring us? This was such a great start. Wow, this looks amazing. Oh, it was a flop. Of course, Windows Vista went through what we like to refer to as development hell. It was originally built on Windows XP, but in about 2005, the team restarted development entirely. Codename Longhorn had a ton of progress already made, as seen here, and yet it was all thrown away, just like that. The team had to start from scratch, now using the architecture of Windows Server 2003, a special version of XP that was designed to handle server infrastructure. They had very little time, and the OS would be completed as Vista by the end of 2006, making its worldwide debut on January 30th, 2007. The appearance of the OS is unlike anything before it, with everything feeling clearer, cleaner, more modern. Everything is coated in glass, specifically Aero glass. What you may not know is that Aero is actually an acronym for this. Whoa! This theme is intensive on the processor, and many lower-end computers had to default to the more basic look, but it's undeniably fantastic on the eyes compared to what came before. The start menu has the same split as before, but the style with directories popping out of one another was finally removed and replaced with an all programs list and a search function. At long last, you could just type the program you want to run straight from start instead of using the run menu. The classic menu can still be enabled, however, if you so choose. The entire sound library was also refreshed again, and a vast majority of the Vista sounds are still in Windows 11. This was essentially the final time that a complete sound overhaul was done, including those classic 4. Also joining the party is the sidebar, the first attempt at implementing widgets to the desktop, referred to as gadgets here. You can select from a small range of pre-installed gadgets, or go searching online for more suitable ones, since the defaults are not all that useful, honestly. The sidebar as a whole is certainly an interesting concept, but it failed to catch on for good reason. It simply was not necessary. As beautiful as this OS appears, it naturally demanded a lot of processing power and and video memory to display and function. The system requirements from XP to Vista were a huge jump, as Microsoft had decided to target this at the latest and greatest computers, forgetting about the common user who is still on a modest Windows XP device. Due to the push for an upgrade, Microsoft would offer Vista on computers that absolutely could not handle it, and that made the experience ridiculously slow. Ironically, my Vista machine runs faster than my XP machine, so thanks Oracle. Vista was also bloated with borderline unnecessary software more than XP was. The new user account control security feature was considered overbearing on its first run. Vista came out with way too many labeled editions. The launch did not go well, to say the least. It's such a shame too, because when running on a genuinely capable PC of the late 2000s, Vista could perform decently well. Microsoft had to work quickly to right this wrong, and so they did with Windows NT 6.1, or Windows 7. Yeah, sure, just don't even bother matching the version number anymore. Windows 7 released in mid-2009, and it's very similar to Vista on the surface. The biggest and probably greatest difference is in the taskbar. In order to understand this, we'll need to circle all the way back to Windows 95. There was an update in 1997 that added the feature known as Quick Launch, which allowed for certain functions to be appended to the taskbar permanently for single-click opening. The feature was included with Windows 98 off the bat, making it where most first used it, and it remained through all versions up to Vista. Windows 7 takes the Quick Launch feature and essentially turns it into the entire taskbar. Opening a program no longer displays contents, just an icon, which bears a shocking resemblance to the very first versions of Windows. With a more compressed taskbar, there's now space to pin applications to it that will permanently stay, and the start menu can be used to add programs to the taskbar that aren't even open. The bar itself is thicker to accommodate the icons, making for a clean and seamless design. This is the ultimate evolution of the taskbar, in my opinion, and it's surprising that it took Microsoft so long to actually integrate Quick Launch as a permanent feature. Again, even Windows 1.0 had something akin to this. As for the OS itself, Microsoft made sure to optimize the system a lot and tone down the amount of resources that Aero uses, focusing more on performance and addressing the holes in Vista. User account control was altered to pop up less often, the amount of software was toned down, security flaws were patched, and hey, throw in a button that lets you minimize all your programs in one click. The only complaint I have is that there are still way too many versions of 7 out there, even if less than Vista. Just stop. Alas, Windows 7 managed to kick Vista to the computational curb, and finally pushed users of XP to upgrade to a genuinely useful OS. This is my personal favorite release of Windows ever, and it once again proved popular enough that Microsoft continued supporting it until as late as 2023, if users paid for it. If you count this, it means 7 got more support than XP by an extra year. Legendary.
So how can you go about topping Windows 7? Can you even top Windows 7? Well, the answer is no. You certainly f***ing can't. See? It doesn't even have a startup sound!
Before even getting to the OS, look at the new Windows logo. It's back to being all blue like it was at the very start, which is okay, but the design itself is just corporate and soulless. Not a particular fan, to say the least. The colors of the Windows logo would be granted to the logo of Microsoft itself, with each color now representing a product. Red for Office, green for Xbox, blue for Windows, and yellow for Bing. This is a genuinely clever concept, but it did mean ripping the Windows logo of its charm. You can't have it all, can you? Anyway, 2012 saw the release of NT 6.2, or Windows 8, because who gives a shit about version numbers anymore? This one was hardly designed with the desktop user in mind, because Microsoft was about to launch the Surface Pro line of tablet-laptop hybrids the following year, so they wanted an OS that was suitable for a keyboard and mouse and a touchscreen all at once. The result would be the death of Aero and the birth of the Metro design language. language. Gone is the start menu in the corner and the start button itself, as the new OS now boots straight into the start screen. Yes, screen. The idea behind this was to break through the constraint of having your launcher in only a corner of the screen by expanding it to be the screen, but the screen doesn't even house your actual programs by default. Instead, it houses a collection of mostly filler tiles, referred to as metro applications, which once set up, just flick through typically useless information that the common user can access on his or her own, and had been doing so in previous versions. Not helping is that if you were desperate enough to click on one of these applications, it would immediately fill the screen, and no visible option to minimize or close it would appear. Real nice, even Windows 1.0 had a clickable close option. So, how do you get out? There are 5 ways. You can use the normal Alt F4 shortcut as always. You can use the Windows key on the keyboard to return to the start screen, which minimizes and does not close the app. You can drag the window away, which is only viable for tablets and hardly works right using a mouse. You can hover your mouse in the bottom left corner to pull up a start shortcut, which also does not close the program. And why do this when you can just have a start button? Or you can hover your mouse over the right side of the screen to pull up the charms. Yes, they call these charms. Click start and once again, the app is minimized, not closed. Notice how all 5 of those methods don't make use of anything visible on the screen by itself, and only 2 of those methods actually close the app. Again, this is okay for the Surface Pro, but abysmal on a desktop and even worse for a laptop due to the limited mobility of a trackpad. In short, the Metro applications are a complete waste of resources for the common user. In order to find your real programs, you just have to start typing while on the screen of tiles, and it will register as a search automatically. That's nice, I guess, but it also means you can't search for programs while on the desktop itself. Speaking of, the desktop is one of the many tiles on the start screen. It's like the OS wants you to think the desktop is an optional accessory. The desktop is essentially the same as that of Windows 7, but the Aero theme is ditched for this flat one, and the start button is gone as previously mentioned. This would normally not be a big deal since the start screen is horrendous, but remember, you need to open programs with it, so that's definitely convenient. Most of the Vista and 7 sounds were retained in the files, albeit unused, and only a select few new sounds were added. Also, this is really minor, but there aren't any pre-installed games on Windows 8. Thanks for removing that, you Needless to say, Windows 8 did not pan out so well with general users. Despite the goal of making a unifying OS to fit both tablets and desktops, it was far more suited for the former, leaving the typical computer user disillusioned. Windows 7 would continue to reign supreme, but Microsoft did release Windows 8.1 to compensate, or Windows NT 6.3. Version numbers. 8.1 was sent out only a year after the original in 2013, and made modifications such as reinstating the start button on the desktop, adding minimize and close buttons to those pesky Metro applications, and adding dedicated power and settings buttons to the start screen. These changes were presumably made with the desktop and laptop user in mind, allowing them to have a more comfortable experience with the Metro UI than what was available before. It proved moderately successful, completely replacing the original Windows 8 and having support for the full 10 years, though 7 was still very much the preferred choice. Many developers came up with programs to revert the start menu to its former glory, most notably being Start8, which was a paid program. Overall, it was clear that the Metro design language was not going to be the hit that Microsoft wanted, and the next version would need to be a return to form. So, Windows NT 7.0 would... Oh, they skipped 7? Alright, Windows NT 8. Okay, no 8. No 9 either. Windows NT 10.0. Is it at least called Windows 9? Oh, of fucking course it's not. Ugh, no startup again? Windows 10, July 2015. Skip all of the other numbers, break continuity, Windows 10. This was the most significant release of them all when it first hit the scene, as Microsoft labeled it as the final version of Windows. Indeed, Windows 10 would receive major yearly updates, keeping it as fresh as possible up to 2021 when, well, we'll get there momentarily. Windows 10 retains the Metro design language to some extent, as the OS still appears quite flat, but it has returned to some of the conventions of previous versions. For one, the start button does not bring you to a full screen of it opens a start menu? Holy crud, they brought it back! The way it was meant to be! Hallelujah!
That genuinely seagulls.
The tiles aren't gone for good, as they are now appended to the right side of the start menu, replacing the file directory shortcuts. Instead of opening useless Metro applications, though, they open normal programs. Thank goodness for that. On the left, well, it depends on the version. The very first release of Windows 10, built 1507, will showcase recent programs, and a button can be clicked to display every program on the computer in alphabetical order. The alphabetical view became the default a few builds later, and the Metro tiles would eventually be reworked into more normal application launchers in 2020. It seems that Microsoft has slowly drifted away from Windows 8 and continues to progressively distance itself from the 8 specific quirks. I think the alphabetical list is a pretty convenient way to list programs in general, and if that doesn't work for you, the search feature is also now a dedicated segment of the taskbar. Also joining the taskbar is Cortana, a Windows version of Siri, the Task View button, which views tasks, and Internet Explorer begins its demise as Microsoft Edge takes over. It's a browser that no sane person uses after opening once and downloading a real one, yet Microsoft really pushed Edge over the years. I'm sure that won't halt anytime soon, considering the current trajectory of the program. Windows 10 brings back most conventions of Windows 7 and before, with a focus on the desktop user. However, there is now a mode designed specifically for tablet computers, which optimizes the taskbar and other such features for a touchscreen. See, this is how you make an OS for different types of device. Instead of putting everything into one interface, just define separate interfaces. Who knew? The classic minimize, maximize, close trio has been simplified to the point of essentially becoming 3 basic shapes, which is an interesting development over time. What was once a set of arrows and a giant hyphen became a line, a square, and a cross. The close button now only turns red when the user hovers over it, by the way. Another new addition is window snapping, where app windows can be easily tiled into various configurations. That also feels like a feature from 1.0. The parallels between versions are quite impressive. Due to the initial plan of making Windows 10 the big finale, as was reasoning for the number 10 to begin with, the UI would progressively have minor updates, and I believe this video is the best source to learn about the specifics. A lot of the new Windows 8 sounds were changed again in Windows 10, though a select few did stay. I'm not sure how common of an opinion this is, but I prefer the Windows 8 sound design, even in spite of how the OS itself is. Due to its long lifespan, with support only ending a month before this video's release, Windows 10 would become the most widely used version of Windows in the world, surpassing Windows 7. Even today, many users have not upgraded, and they have pretty sufficient reasons for that, which we will get to. Is this perfect? Absolutely not. However, it is, in a way, the endpoint of Windows innovation. The OS found its footing, the formula that will work for almost everyone, and it was time to settle here. This is, essentially, the Windows release of all time. Or, at least, that's how it was meant to be. And now, we're back to where we first began. The sound that started this video is now the final sound we get to hear. In spite of its name, this is technically still Windows 10.0, since Microsoft has really lost the ability to count. Windows 11 was officially released on October 5th, 2021, back when, well, he was at his peak in relevance. Pretty sure he was still using Windows 10 at the time, though. Anywho, we have the return of the startup sound and a decently significant overhaul to the user interface. A vast majority of 11 came from a cancelled project known as Windows 10X, which was planned to be a variation of Windows 10 that was designed with touchscreen users at the forefront, and specifically users of dual-screen devices. On the same day of its announcement, October 2nd, 2019, Microsoft also announced a Surface Pro with dual screens, to be known as the Surface Neo. As of the release of this video, though, the Neo has never seen an official release, and neither has Windows 10X, which was a officially cancelled a few months before 11 was announced. While I couldn't actually get 10X to run for you lovely Homo sapiens, screenshots showcase the center taskbar and new start menu that would be carried into the Windows 11 that we actually received. The logo is no longer angular, now appearing even more mundane, but that's to be expected by now. By default, your taskbar is aligned to the center of the screen, which is a decent move on paper, but I personally keep it to the left because it just looks better that way in my opinion. The start menu has now abandoned tiles altogether, and will now display a collection of pinned applications of your choosing, as well as including the alphabetical list from 10 with a button press. The search feature also remains, though the placement of the bar has changed. Some app icons have finally been updated for the first time since Windows Vista, which I appreciate, albeit the Vista sound set is still in the files. The few new Windows 11 sounds are... I don't particularly like them. Even the ones from Windows 10 felt like they had more personality than these relatively soulless ones, though I do still believe Windows 8 had the best of the modern bunch. Windows 11 would mark the official death of the Metro design language, with the Fluent language taking over. The windows themselves are rounded now, rather than sharp-edged, minor animations were added to the taskbar, and overall, everything is designed to be a bit softer, more welcoming. Visually, it is an improvement to the OS, but I do admittedly prefer the late Windows 10 interface when it comes to usability. 11 feels like it's more of a pretty face, but lacking in personality.
Serious question. Why do you have to talk like you know anything about women?
A gentleman can dream, Mooks, can't he? And besides, any sane individual knows that personality reigns supreme.
I agree, but honestly, most people probably wouldn't.
Well, that's their loss. I'm sure the one for me will appear someday. I'm longing for you, dear madam.
You would assume that Windows 11 would be an easy upgrade from 10, right? After all, back when 10 released, Microsoft forced it upon the users of all preceding versions in order to make it the most used. Well, with 11, they said F you, and upped the system requirements. A Trusted Platform Module, or TPM, is a special key encryption chip that is required for Windows 11, because why the f not? Thank you for being anti-consumer. Speaking of, later Windows 11 versions now use a lot of AI features via Copilot, features that I do not believe the common consumer ever uses, as I myself have never touched them. Hell, now laptops are beginning to include a Copilot key on the keyboard, which is just fucking sad. Another downgrade is in the context menus, which are the options that appear on practically anything upon a right click. When right-clicking on a Windows app itself, the context menu is bloated up and has ironically far less options, and you now need to click more options to display the context menu from 10 and before. Why the f was this considered a positive change? Making the menu bigger is nice, including icons is cool, but if most options are in the original context menu, and the original menu can be accessed, why not just keep it? You would never think that someone like me could care about a context menu of all OS staples, but I do. Windows 11 only passed 10 in market share a few months ago, in July of 2025, but it was a very bumpy journey to get here. The interface alterations and AI nonsense have made common users stick to 10, or just ditch Windows entirely and swap to Linux. I don't believe Microsoft will ever lose the operating system competition, simply due to the compatibility and general ease of use Windows has, but this does seem to be a low point. Windows 11 is fine, totally serviceable, but it does begin to reveal the cracks in Microsoft's motivations to some extent. Alas, this is where our retrospective shuts down. Startup but no shutdown? What a ripoff! Windows 12 has been kicked around various times ever since 11 was released. Microsoft claimed to officially return to a 3-year release schedule, meaning that we would have received Windows 12 last year, but that didn't happen. It's probably not coming this year either, so who knows? Rumor has it that it's going to lean even further into AI integration, meaning it will require even more system power. If said rumors turn out to be accurate, then I will absolutely not upgrade to Windows 12. Windows 11 is certainly not the greatest version, but it does everything I could ever ask a computer to do. It works for me, so I let it exist on my device. That's all there is to it, really. It's been 40 whole years since this software was launched, to the very day. The retrospective has has dragged on for a very long time, but I am proud to conclude it here. Happy 40th anniversary, Microsoft Windows. I hope that I have given this OS the justice it deserves. I have been harsh on particular versions, yes, but fundamentally, Windows is a 9 out of 13 piece of software. This is the default for good reason. I hope for more versions to release in the future, perhaps bringing back some of the concepts that Windows 10X and 11 felt necessary to scrap. When it is all said and done, though, I do need to address the looming threat surrounding me. While I do that, I wish for you all to enjoy yourselves.
So, you're really telling me that lowering the shade won't solve anything?
Of course not. You have to take more precautions.
Such as? You must assist me here!
To be blunt, nothing can prepare you. That's just how he is.
You're not being particularly helpful, Mooks. Should I? If nothing can help, should I just run?
I mean, I'm not gonna stop
To
you.
Ritz I go!
Well, you better not run into any human-sized lizards on the way.